All right, we are now live. Let me go over to my, starting our stream. And let's see if I can find the live stream page so I can get the, looking for the live chat box here. Yes, we've got that all enabled. And pop out chat, there we go. I wanted to get the chat window popped out, so that is out. And I don't know, you are up. Okay, so somebody can see us. Can you, Shelton Designer. Okay, so it's saying we are up, and can you, hey Sonia. Okay, there we go. Yes, we are live streaming. Can't hear Aaron at all. Go ahead and talk, Aaron. Yes. Okay, hope you guys can't read lips. Okay, so which one of us cannot be heard? Looking at the comments here to see. Can you guys hear me? Nope, no sound. All right.
Oh, wow, no audio for Aaron. Is there audio for Chris?
Chris has sound, Aaron doesn't.
Well, that's the same problem you were having earlier.
Aaron,
but Chris, you can hear me, right?
I can hear you just fine. We're doing a Skype call when we're broadcasting it. So, okay, now we hear you fine. Up now, yes, we can hear you. There you go. Hear you both now. All right, I did change the setting on my end, so that must have been on my end. Chris is now echoing. Oh boy. Aaron is loud. All right,
I'm always loud. I'm sorry, I won't yell.
Yeah,
I'm going to try to bring this chat thing a little closer to my camera so I'm not always looking off at the side. Testing.
All right, this is the vagaries of all right, let me try that. How does that, did that help anything when what I just set? I like the echo. Great. Aaron's mic picking up speakers maybe, or turn the volume down, Aaron?
If I turn my volume down, because I do this from my
Chris has the echo. Okay, Chris is okay. So there's a little delay when we make a change on something here. So,
no more echo.
Oh,
Sweet.
No more
it says
echo.
We both sound fine.
Boom. There we go. Okay, I had to turn off a microphone setting on my end, I think. Good for both. Okay, thanks guys for helping with our quality control there. There's so many settings on this broadcast stuff that sometimes you don't, have to mess around with stuff before you get it right. Okay, so yes, as you can see, Aaron and I are here, live streaming, surprise. And we thought, with some experiences we both had recently, and with the popularity of Leah's show and things kind of taking off in the Scientology watching world and more people coming on board, we thought we might talk about a couple things that have come up that I think personally, serve to create some divisiveness, within the ex-Scientology world that I thought maybe we might talk about here to address, because I think we should all be on the same side all the time about everything always, but I know that can't always happen. So anyway, Aaron, what do you have to say about this from the start here?
All right, well, let's see. I'm just posting a link to this in the
go ahead and finish that.
Facebook page.
Yep.
Boom. Okay, cool. Well, I think what made us want to discuss this, because normally it wouldn't really be worth discussing publicly. Like, inside baseball stuff is not particularly interesting to the non-Scientology watching public. But because this Facebook group, which I think is over 9,000 members strong right now, because it's set up and it's dedicated to Leah Remini and the show and supporting Leah Remini in the show, there's been a lot of interaction and posts from a lot of former Scientologists in the show. And I think what they have noticed recently is that there can be a lot of disagreement amongst former Scientologists as to what is a proper way to think or to speak or to act in regards to Scientology in general. And there were some non-Scientologists chiming in to a post recently where there was some debate going on as to whether it was acceptable or appropriate or forgivable or whatever you want to say. For 2 episodes ago, Leah had said something to the effect of, not everything in Scientology was bad. And then at the end of the episode, she brought on 2 independent Scientology auditors to discuss some of the experiences that they had had. And I think what would be helpful for the non-Scientology watching public, particularly the ones that have been paying a lot of attention to Leah's show, is to understand that former Scientologists are very divided on the subject of whether anything in Scientology was ever helpful, and whether people who... Well, let me just quickly define what I think roughly the 3 groups are, and then we'll just discuss them. You have people who have left Scientology and just want nothing to do with it anymore for their own personal reasons. I put myself into that category. And when I say nothing to do with it, obviously I still talk about Scientology a lot. But I have absolutely no interest in getting any kind of Scientology auditing. I have no interest in doing any kind of Scientology courses. I will do everything in my power to prevent my children from ever having any involvement in Scientology in any way, shape, or form. But I do not harbor any ill will towards those who left Scientology but still want to pursue auditing outside of the control of the Church of Scientology. I don't feel weirdly towards those people. I don't have weird ideas about those people. I don't think they're still brainwashed. I don't like using that word in general. And I can already hear people going, what do you mean they're not brainwashed? They believe in the reactive mind, they believe in auditing, they believe in the e-meter. And I go, no, I think even amongst independent Scientologists, you will probably find a discrepancy between what it is they actually believe in. Not all auditing is the same as every other auditing. The OT levels are a completely different animal than the auditing below the level of clear, for example. There's many, many different kinds of auditing. So all I'm saying is that people who leave Scientology and still want to participate in the subject of Scientology, I have no problem with that. So that's one bucket. People that leave, they want nothing to do with it, but they have no problem with others who do. The other bucket would be people who leave and are still independent Scientologists. Like they practice and participate in the activities of Scientology, but outside of the Church of Scientology, and have very harsh feelings towards people who no longer believe in the tech and who criticize the tech and let's say belittle or degrade the tech or make fun of it or ridicule it. So that's the second group, right? They're very defensive about wanting to defend the subject of Scientology outside of the Church of Scientology. And then the third bucket would be people who have left Scientology and think it's all bad. There's nothing redeeming about the subject of Scientology in any way, shape, or form. And anyone who says otherwise is still on the Kool-Aid and is condoning abuse, condoning mental abuse by even implying it might be acceptable for people to continue with the practice of auditing outside of the control of the Church of Scientology. It might be too simplistic to say there's only 3 buckets, because in all of these 3 buckets, you're going to find many shades of gray.
I think it would be more of a spectrum rather than 3 separate buckets. I put everything on a spectrum, though.
But when you hear people arguing, it's usually people in these 3 buckets arguing.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I have to put myself kind of halfway, though, between a couple of those buckets, because I have to hold on to an intellectual honesty with myself and an integrity that Scientology methodologies and techniques are harmful. And they do harmful things to people in the course of certain kinds of auditing procedures, for example. You can do harm to somebody. And I that's how I feel, right? And I think I have good reasons to feel that way. But I won't call people who engage in Scientology activities outside the church, or independent Scientologists, whatever their flavor, whatever brand of Scientology they've cherry-picked to be their version, because all independents do that, to one degree or another. It is impossible to practice the full array of Scientology tech and policy outside the church, because if you were honestly doing that, you wouldn't be outside the church, because Hubbard makes it very clear in his policies that that's being a squirrel, right? He makes it very clear you have to be in alignment with the official organizations of Scientology to even call yourself a Scientologist. So automatically somebody who breaks away is breaking away from at least that much of Hubbard.
Sure.
By being an independent. But often they break away from far more than that. They break away from all the OSA stuff, they break away from a lot of the ethics stuff, and they just want the techniques of certain auditing procedures to continue to be done, or certain training. They think Hubbard had his mind right. You know, he had some good things to say or some good points to make philosophically,
right,
about things like the condition formulas and stuff like that. So all independent Scientologists, I think, are to one degree or another in disagreement with some aspect of Hubbard's works, but there's parts of it that they like and they want to hold on to. I will then go into, my view is I will take on an individual independent, each one on a case-by-case basis as to how harmful are they being. I won't say all independents are all equally harmful.
What would be...
And I also,
go ahead.
Just one last point, is I also will not deride any of them by calling them names, saying that they're stupid or morons or evil or idiots or they must be destroyed or something like that, because I don't think that. I don't really think that about much of anybody short of, I don't know, North Korean leaders or Nazis, like I don't get into who should we be destroying today, I just think that for me, it's always been independent Scientology, almost from day one for me, has been positioned as a way station on the way out of Scientology, and that people will still hold. I feel that most independents are people who are holding on to the rightness of having done it in the first place and feel that they're still getting something out of it, and therefore they don't want to let go of it. And I go, okay, well, that's fine. You can absolutely do whatever you want to with your life. But I think that if you were to inform yourself a bit more about where some of this stuff comes from and what it's really doing, maybe you might change your mind. And that's the conversation I would have with them if I were to engage with them one-on-one. So that's why I think you and I are on common ground, Aaron, when we both look at the guys who are saying, they're evil, they must be destroyed, it's all horrible, it's all awful, and I just go, no, not really. I think that's a little too black and white for me.
Right. And here's what makes it hard to discuss this at all, is that it's not possible for me to describe my accurate thoughts and position on this in 2 minutes, in 10 minutes, in 30 minutes, in an hour. This is the kind of thing where you'd sit around with your friends in the backyard chatting for hours or days before you would feel that you are able to accurately communicate your precise thoughts and opinions about this. It's not possible to put it into a soundbite, and people want to hear a soundbite so they can decide whether they agree with you or not. And so, I think you and I are on the same page in the sense that we think it doesn't make any sense to just bash or insult people that still want to get auditing outside of the church on their own determinism.
Yep.
And yet we probably disagree on plenty of things on this subject of to what degree things are abusive and which things are abusive. But again, that would be something, it wouldn't be possible to hash those things out in 10 minutes or an hour or even 3. And there's so much that we could talk about it that we have to prioritize. What do we want to talk about? Mm-hmm. And so, for example, you said that you view independent Scientology largely as a way station on the way out of Scientology. But at the same time, many people just leave. I put myself in that category.
Oh, yeah. Not that it has to be a way station. It wasn't for me either.
Sure.
I just look at, in some people's experience, that's what happens.
Sure. And at the same time, many independents just stay that way. But I think what you're saying is the majority of independents, they land there right out of the church, and just given enough time, most of the independents eventually abandon that as well.
That's right.
Right.
And I think the numbers prove that out, because when
that's
you look
probably true.
When you look at how many people have left Scientology, how many of them went through independence, and then how many are still independent Scientologists. So if you were going to have a convention and you were going to get all of them together, it would be a pretty small convention.
It would be.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if you call a couple, like at most worldwide, a couple thousand people, that's not a lot of people.
No, no, and it's a lot
You
less than a
know.
couple thousand people.
Exactly.
Um,
I
but
actually think it falls under 1,000, but I'm always like overestimating to try to be conservative and
right,
moderate on stuff that I don't have hard numbers on. But what I do know is when they do have conventions like in Las Vegas or, the group that's in Israel, these are hundreds of people. These are not thousands of people.
right. I mean,
Yeah.
even Mike Rinder was an independent Scientologist for years after he left the church.
Hmm.
And
And that's why I call it a way station, because Marty, kind of the same way. I mean, as far as he was practicing, and then he started saying things that, well, it's not so good. And of course, we love talking about Marty because he's gone completely backwards on everything. So I don't mean to open up that can of worms, but just that was an example of somebody coming out, still practicing, and then saying, "Oh yeah, actually, I've read more stuff on this, and actually, it's all bullshit."
right. So there was something I wanted to ask you about. Okay, what is your what are your comments on the argument that the reason it's wrong to to be okay, or to say that the reason it's wrong to say that if independent Scientologists are practicing Scientology in a way that doesn't bankrupt people, that doesn't destroy families, that doesn't use high pressure sales tactics, that does not restrain people against their will, that does not subject people to invasive security checking and interrogating.
Yeah.
And if someone wants to say that if people want to do that, whose place is it to tell them that's wrong? And if someone wants to say, well, the problem with that is you're normalizing this behavior, what would you say to that?
Well, my answer to that would be the First and Second, or the First Amendment, right? I mean, in the United States, at least, we certainly have the right to practice whatever religious practices we want, and it's not my place to dictate to people what they can and can't do in the privacy of their own home, for example, amongst consenting adults.
Well,
Right?
somebody would argue that the First Amendment says it's not the government's place, and that you as a person can absolutely take a position on that. So,
Oh no, I'll carry on and tell you my position. I'm just saying that, from a regulatory standpoint, right? Because some people
no.
really
But like,
get
if
into
someone
this,
says
right?
you are a piece of shit normalizer
Right.
for refusing to condemn independent Scientologists, what would you say?
I'd say, well, that's nice to say, but I don't think I'm a normalizer. Thank you.
What do you mean? You're saying it's okay.
Yeah, but here's the thing. I would never give up on trying to convince that independent Scientologist to not do that. But I would not do it in an overtly aggressive way or even in a passively aggressive way. I would do it by saying, hey, look, I think there's some more you can learn about this. And here it is, which is what I do on my channel, right? So, so I would say, look, education, not enforcement, not name calling and ridiculing, is really the only way I can offer as a road out. I would not say they're fine and they can do what they want and I'm never going to have anything to say about it.
Mm-hmm.
I would say they're fine, they can do whatever they want. I don't happen to agree with what they're doing, but it's not my place to tell them that they're horrible, awful, disgusting people, and I am normalizing that behavior. Every video I put out is an effort to not normalize it.
So, sure. Okay.
So I agree to disagree, kind of, toward the independence.
Well, do you agree that is normalizing? That refusing
I don't think that's
condemn
no, I don't.
independent Scientology is normalizing it.
No, I think my disagreements are more subtle or more nuanced than the thing. So that's
right.
So that's why I say no. I don't think I'm normalizing it.
Right. I know you're not normalizing it.
Well, that would be my response to being accused of that. That's my response to it, right? I think you and I are both definitely not normalizing it.
Right.
That's not how I would describe what we're doing.
Right. So I was literally accused of being a covert independent Scientologist because I insisted that it would be absurd okay, here's the problem. The debate that was happening on the Leah Remini Scientology and the Aftermath Facebook page.
Yeah, which, by the way, is not, to address a comment from earlier, sorry to cut you off, Aaron, that's not an official Scientology Facebook page.
No,
Scientologists do have official Facebook pages. They can be on the internet to interact with each other about how wonderful Scientology is. And if you saw Mike Rinder's blog, you'd see all the rules and guidelines for those Facebook pages, and they're ridiculously working at thought control and information control on those pages.
Sure.
But they do have access to that, just to make sure we're clear with everybody on this Facebook page we're talking about is one that's in support of Leah's show.
Right. Keep the call running. I'm worried I might be having a power problem. Like, if my phone dies, we're kind of screwed on this thing.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I don't want that.
All right. But whatever. If it dies, it dies. But get it? If it dies, it dies. Oh, okay. Okay, so here's the thing. The problem is that this debate that was raging on the Facebook group, Leah Remini, Scientology, and the Aftermath, and if anyone's not in that group, you should join it. It's a great group.
It is. It's awesome.
There was really two conversations, unfortunately, happening at the same time and overlapping with each other, and I think people having one conversation were responding to comments that were happening in the other conversation, and I would characterize the two conversations as this. One debate was whether there was anything wrong with the comment Leah made on the show 2 shows ago. Scientology wasn't all bad. Just that comment. And the other debate was about whether it was wise or appropriate to bring on independent Scientology auditors at the end of the show. To me, they're two separate conversations. Personally, I have no problem with either of those things. But they are two separate conversations. Because I can see why someone might object to the Scientology auditors coming on, because those people felt like it was promoting independent Scientology, which is not what was happening. In my view, that was Leah showing, I'm not against the concept of Scientology. I'm against the abusive practices that are occurring in the Church of Scientology. And even if I was against it, I can talk to these people. These people are my friends. Whereas inside Scientology, you couldn't. You can't talk to people you disagree with like that. So, but I digress. I can see how somebody might object to the independent Scientology auditors coming on, but at the same time, I can't understand people who object that anyone would ever find anything helpful in Scientology. Like, why the hell do these people think people stay in Scientology in the beginning, in the early days, if there's nothing helpful about it? Now, some of the arguments against it being helpful is, well, LRH stole all that stuff from other people. That doesn't change the conversation. So I don't care. So what? Like, if you walk into a Church of Scientology and you say, hi, I'm going to give you money. Can I take a little intro Scientology course? And they say, yes, here's your intro Scientology course. Sit down in a Scientology course room and study it underneath our Scientology supervisor. And then it's like, it doesn't matter where the information came from. That person paid for something they thought was Scientology. Scientologists who thought it was Scientology delivered it to them. Like, it's splitting hairs to be like, how dare you? How dare you say you found something in Scientology helpful when LRH stole that shit from other people? In the early days of Scientology, LRH admitted he had basically distilled, I'm telling you what he said, distilled all of this work through centuries of work of other men. It wasn't until in the mid-'60s or whatever that he started to pretend like he literally created all this from whole cloth and no one ever else added anything beneficial to it. Like, even the study tech, apparently he stole that from a public Scientologist. I did a whole video on that. Exactly. And
I talked to the woman that he stole it from.
Which is incredible. But on just a conversational level, if someone says, well, I found the study tech part of Scientology helpful, how dare you?
Right.
That wasn't Scientology. Well, who the fuck else is out there selling that shit? I don't know, but I don't claim that no one else is.
Well, yeah. There's more to be said about that specifically, but
maybe I'm oversimplifying it. But that's the point of the conversation. If I go into Baskin Robbins and I say, "Damn, you guys sell great ice cream," and someone goes, "That wasn't fucking Baskin Robbins. They stole their recipes from Ben and Jerry's. How dare you, sir?"
And I think it's that response we have a problem with more so than the idea that it actually was Ben and Jerry's ice cream, right? Because the point of saying that, and I am somebody who has said that, although I haven't said it like you just said it, in this way of like, how dare you, right? However, there is a good point to be made in saying, hey, look, this wasn't actually L. Ron Hubbard's creation, and the reason for saying that is because the true source of the help was a different source than L. Ron Hubbard and Scientology, and therefore what you think you are praising when you're praising L. Ron Hubbard and Scientology for the help you received is actually Freud or Breuer or Jung or or this independent Scientologist who, field staff member or whatever, who came up with this idea in 1952 and gave it to Hubbard, and Hubbard ran with it. And you go, okay, so all I'm trying to acknowledge there is that Scientology, or the point that's being made when you make that point is that Scientology is misrepresenting itself to you as the source of, the help that you received, and therefore to acknowledge Scientology is to acknowledge a bit of a lie.
Sure.
Right?
This is the perfect example where we would need hours and hours and hours to discuss.
Exactly. That's right.
Because I agree with what you just said, but I would know of Scientologists who would disagree that Scientologists believe every part of Scientology was made by L. Ron Hubbard, and I'll give you one example. Do you know Dan O'Connor?
Oh yeah, the senior CS Kansas City.
Correct.
Yes.
I remember when we were training at Flag, and he said something to me along the lines of, there's lots of other pieces of truth in other bodies of knowledge.
Dan said that.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
But even if you have, let's say, 20 other bodies of knowledge, whether you're talking about the humanities or other religions or anything, and he goes, let's say 20% of that one is true, and 20% of that one is true, and 10% of that one is true, and 60% of that one is true. Scientology has taken all of the workable and helpful things from all of these things and distilled it down. And Scientology is the only body of knowledge where 100% of it is true and helpful.
I know that argument, and that was Hubbard's argument. They're just forwarding Hubbard's argument with that.
Sometimes he said that, sometimes he didn't. Sometimes,
yeah, but he did. He definitely. I know of at least 2 or 3 lectures where he absolutely used that reasoning, right? And so they're just extending his reasoning on that. I've also heard, I'll tell you this, on talked to an independent on Reddit one day, and here's the other point of view you get about this, is they will acknowledge, yes, Hubbard was not the single source, da-da-da-da-da, and you know what? And this is where you just kind of, it's almost like like arguing with somebody on faith, the reply is, I know all that, and I don't care.
Right.
I don't care.
And that's okay.
And that's what I'm going to do, what I'm going to do, and I get something out of it, and fuck off, right? And that's right. and there's no reply to that. There's no, at that point they're going with feeling. They're not going with, they're doing it because it feels good to them. And right. And I can't, there's nothing you can really do with that. You can't argue somebody out of it because they're not arguing from a place of logic and they rationally came to this conclusion. They're arguing from a place of, look, it feels good, I'm doing it, and I'm not going to stop no matter what you say.
Sure. What would you say? Okay, so...
And yes, by the way, in reply to a comment here, I did say Kansas City, because that's where Dan O'Connor was from.
That's right. And he still is, the senior CS Kansas City. It's incredible.
Yes.
Did you know... I probably can't say that publicly.
Okay.
All right. Okay, so I'm not sure I want to open up this can of worms, but earlier I'm only mentioning this, and we can decide how deep to get into it because I feel like it would take over the whole thing.
Yep.
When you say Scientology, did you say Scientology auditing is abusive or destructive or harmful? Auditing is harmful.
I said that there are certain auditing, or what I meant the thought is there are certain auditing techniques which are absolutely, without question, psychologically manipulative and damaging.
Right. No question.
No question.
Would you concede if someone were to say, well, I did this particular auditing process and it made me feel great and I loved it? What would you
Fine.
say to the person?
Yeah, great. You had a great subjective experience. That's awesome.
You wouldn't go, how dare you, sir?
Yeah, no, I would not do that.
What about
No.
the idea that if they felt good after that auditing process or any subjective benefit they felt they had, what about the fact that if it was only temporary? Would you say it doesn't matter that you felt it was helpful because it was only temporary?
The conversation would be, what gains do you felt you got from that auditing?
Mm-hmm.
How long do you think those gains are going to last?
Right.
Would be the questions I would ask, right? And then I would probe from there. Because if the person thought that something that they received in auditing was a permanent gain that was always going to be with them, I might ask more questions about that, right?
Sure.
In the direction of getting them to maybe question what's really going on with the auditing. In other words, there's an after session euphoria, that a person will feel. But from your experience, I think, and certainly from mine, within at most 2 or 3 days, that's gone, man. It is
sure,
gone,
sure.
Right.
So there's a comment here. I feel good after a gin and tonic, but it's still bad for me. And I go, yeah, that's the point. But you still drink them because you
right.
like them.
I think what we want is them to be at the same place we are as far as acknowledging the honesty of how beneficial is this. Because I'll drink a gin and tonic all night long, knowing full well
how dare you, sorry.
I'm potentially destroying my liver in doing so. So I'll acknowledge the good and the bad, and so you kind of want to get them to acknowledge, okay, it's not everything it's cracked up to be. And that's one of the other arguments that well there's no OTs, there's no clears, so why are you doing it? And you kind of go, okay, well, are they doing it because they think they're going to get to clear an OT? If so, let's have a conversation about that.
Right. That's actually something I said to someone recently. Just in the last few days, is I said I think if you were to talk to people that do get auditing in the independent Scientology field, I think you would find they're not getting auditing because they're chasing this magical imaginary state of OT.
Right.
I think you'll find they're not getting auditing because they're chasing this magical imaginary state of clear. They just find that the process of auditing makes them either comfortable or helps them sort their thoughts out on subjects or whatever it is. You'd have to ask them. But my point is, they wouldn't be doing it if they didn't want to and didn't find it helpful. And it seems to me to be almost inhumane to insist on trying to shove it in their face that you think they're wasting their time.
If they're willing to talk,
concerned, feel free to say whatever the hell you want to say.
But to go to their Facebook pages or to go to their forums or something and start ragging on them, I would never do that.
Right. So what about this? Because this is here's a really important aspect to this. There are people, particularly people who have grown up in the Sea Org, not grown up just in Scientology, but grown up in the Sea Org, who have had extremely abusive life experiences and have been just very, very harmed by their overall experience in, I'm going to say, the Sea Org, because that was what was unique about their experience, not generally Scientology, but it was specifically the child Sea Org experience. What would you say that it's insensitive and inconsiderate to those people to say things like, not everything in Scientology was bad?
I don't think that is. It strikes me as almost non sequitur.
Like it's two different subjects.
It's completely two different subjects. You're not, when you're talking about children who grew up in the Sea Org, you're talking about an abusive environment.
Right.
But the abusive environment wasn't from their auditing. The abusive environment was from everything in their environment, the entire attitude with which they were dealt with, the rules and regulations they had to live under, the people who were put in charge of them were wholly incompetent. the education they received was substandard, right? The everything about that experience was almost, I should say, almost everything about that experience was awful, right? Um, but even in that conversation, if you're going to talk about 100% of the picture, then the ranch kids, well, they had access to some horses and they had some nice times out in the fields and running around in the mountains and stuff like that. It wasn't like every second of every day was breaking bones and torturing them.
Right.
But you look at the good versus the bad, and it's so bad that it so outweighs any of the good that you go, yeah, that was a wholly awful, horrible experience growing up in the Sea Org, and I would not wish that on anyone.
Exactly.
That's a whole different conversation from what does the procedure of this auditing process do to you?
Right. And I would say that it's very possible and likely that a lot of those kids growing up in the Cadet Org and the Sea Org were also sort of subjected to various auditing processes, probably against their will, probably because somebody else needed to deliver auditing to somebody to finish a course. And auditing was something they were forced to do, which was true for me in many circumstances. And they grew to hate auditing, which was true for me in most circumstances. And it was not being done for them. And they feel that auditing in general is part of, and an important part of, the entire abusive construct of Scientology. Now, my position is that I don't blame or fault anyone for feeling that way if that was their experience. Just like
absolutely.
Just like I don't blame and fault independent Scientologists for wanting to continue to get auditing, because in their experience, auditing helped them. Where I find fault is where one person insists that anyone who disagrees with their feelings is insulting them or condoning abuse. That's nonsense.
Totally nonsense. No, that doesn't. Those two things don't go together. That's an exaggerated or inflated argument. I don't know the exact fallacy name, but that's making a mountain out of a molehill in order to try to invalidate your position, which is not. It's not even your position. It's not even what you're talking about.
Exactly. And so, let's see. Is our post? Okay, good. It's still there.
Yeah. I think we're wearing pants, by the way. I see some comment here about pants. I'm like, what?
I was actually considering not putting on pants for this video, and then I was like, I would just feel dirty.
I have done videos in shorts, which nobody ever saw, but I've always been wearing pants. Yeah.
I have absolutely done videos without pants before, and I challenge anyone to figure out which ones they were. Okay, awesome. So there's one concept that I'd like to discuss with you.
Yeah.
Because this concept gets used to, to justify bashing people who have the gall to say they found any part of Scientology helpful. And it has to do with saying, well, if the end result of all of it is bad, then it's bad. And for you to say that any parts of it were good contradicts that. And I tried to respond to that by clarifying, whoa, time out. We agree that Scientology is net bad.
Yes.
If you add up the things that are helpful and you add up the things that are abusive or just abusive in any of its definitions, and you add it all up, it's bad. That does not contradict the idea that there are helpful parts. Net bad and all bad are not the same thing.
That is correct.
When Leah Remini goes on the show and says it wasn't all bad, some of these guys wanted to be like, you're condoning it. What are you talking about? Do you not know what these words mean?
Exactly. No, it's a logical fallacy. It absolutely is. It's not. That's not the way to approach that. Because again, it's black and white thinking. What it really comes down to is black and white thinking. And we talk about destructive cults, and we talk about this checklist of destructive cult characteristics. And one of those characteristics is inculcating black and white thinking, because there is not anything in the world, really, that comes down to all black and white. It just doesn't. There's shades of gray in everything.
Right.
So to try to say that an intellectually honest point of view and then be derided because I'm not black and white enough, or you, is just not. That's just not. It's just not being totally intellectually honest. That's
Right.
all.
So here's I have 10% power. Luckily, this is a brand new iPhone, so that 10% should last me at least 5 or 10 minutes.
Okay, good.
A lot of time and effort and energy does get eaten up with former Scientologists arguing with each other about
Yes.
whether anyone is still on any residual Kool-Aid. And here's my plea. Here would be my plea.
Yep.
Every single person out there, former Scientologist, who wants to lend their voice to the conversation, wants to make points that help educate the public about Scientology and the abuses of it, who wants to counter or add on to points made by other former Scientologists, I encourage everybody to start a YouTube channel. You don't need Leah Remini to put you on her show to have a voice.
Yep.
You don't need to be on network television to tell your story or to communicate your truth to the world. I say it takes 10 minutes and a tripod. Start out dirty and
That's
ugly.
how I started.
Start out dirty and ugly and figure out how to make it better.
Yep.
But the truth is, I do love the ongoing debate and discussion. Like I guarantee if you and I had enough time and bandwidth, we could start getting into the stuff that we actually disagree on instead of touching on stuff we agree on.
Sure.
And that would be fun. Well, if people can't discuss subjects like this without calling each other's names and accusing people of thoughts and attitudes that are not theirs, there's something wrong going on there. Mm-hmm. And I just encourage everybody who feels like they're being maybe overlooked or not listened to, or maybe their opinions or experiences are not being represented, start a YouTube channel. I'll link to anybody's videos. If anybody has a video they want to talk about, my friend Jeff Carlson started a YouTube channel called My Clarity After Scientology. Whenever he puts up a video, I'll tweet the link to it. I'll post it. And I'm sure many others will as well. Because the more voices are discussing this, the better. The more interesting it is. The more people that are resources for non-Scientologists to watch their channels and learn from all of our experiences, the better. We don't have to be fighting with each other. We want to help educate the non-Scientology public about what has happened in this organization, why you don't want to be involved with the Church of Scientology, and so on and so forth.
Well, that's the thing. If we could just kind of acknowledge that all of us aren't going to agree on everything all the time about Scientology or anything else, and yet realize that our commonality or our thing that we are working against are the abuses of the Church of Scientology, the problems, the leadership with the Church of Scientology, and stay focused on that rather than on what each other are getting right or wrong about the way we express ourselves about this and the things we expose about it. I think that would be a giant leap forward, because that's why we all got out of Scientology, was because the thought control and the was a bit much, It got to be too much for us, right? And so I think we really need to remind ourselves about that from time to time. And I almost from the first couple months I got out, I've been encouraging people to speak out, as a part of the catharsis, as a part of the healing process, and because I found it immensely helpful, and because we need more voices out there, we really do. It's not like, you, me, Tony, Leah. Okay, good, that's enough. We don't have to hear about this anymore. We've learned everything there is to hear about it. Yeah, no.
Right.
No, that's not how it is.
Yeah, no,
it's not like 4 people come forward with abuses about Catholic priests and we're done with abusive Catholic priests now. Because four people or 5 or 20 or 50 people have come forward with their abuse stories. No, I want every one of them to come forward if they can and if they're willing to. And if it will be, if they're up to talking about it, that's what we need.
Yeah, and just to, anything I can do, any explanations I can give to help it make it easier for people to start doing YouTube channels. I literally take my iPhone, I put it on top of a tripod, I put it on my desk, And for a while, I was recording and then doing the whole editing thing. And then I was like, well, shit, that's too inconvenient. I've just been live streaming all my videos. So you just throw a phone. Now, I mean, you do a higher production value. You actually,
I do.
You do it right.
I mean, you got a whole, but what you see behind me, that's my studio. Right? Like all the stuff you see come out, it's right here. Like this is not high-end, thousands of dollars studio rental time productions that I'm doing here. I just have learned enough things to put something together that looks pretty good because I care about that. But that's not like any of this is a requirement in order to speak out, And also, you, me, other people, we're perfectly willing to, I think, to interview and talk to people, too, who don't want to necessarily do their own YouTube channel, but would like to get out there. I'm down.
Absolutely. The only reason I haven't interviewed more people is because I prefer to do it in person, and it's just very inconvenient, even not on my behalf, but on others' behalf, to organize times to go out there and interview them. Right. But, when you and I do this on video, it seems relatively simple, but you use software and stuff that I have never purchased or bothered to study. Or
I do.
I'm worried I'll mess it up.
I'm kind of into it, I'm kind of into doing these productions because honestly, because it's a blast for me. This is stuff I've wanted to do my entire life. I grew up wanting to be a filmmaker, so this is my thing.
No, I actually want to go and I feel like I'm imposing on people, and I'm like I go to LA. There's like 10 people I could sit down and spend a week and interview them all for 3 or 4 hours each, but I feel like I'd be imposing to even ask. So, but I'm always willing to go and travel anywhere and interview anybody and do like what I did with Mike Render when we sat down and did like 6 hours of interviews, or with Nick Lister, we sat down and did 3 hours of interview, and you can't cover that much in that amount of time, but it's better than nothing.
Exactly. Yeah. To get it out there. So, cool. All right. Well, I think we've. I'm afraid of your phone dying here at any moment. Too. So, okay. So we're gonna wrap up here. We didn't really do this as a Q&A, folks. So we weren't ignoring all of your comments, but we weren't necessarily here to take them all up. So thanks for, throwing them in there. We really appreciate it. I'm gonna probably edit this and post this later as a separate, more edited version of our conversation. But again, thanks for coming around, everybody. And this was just kind of an off-the-cuff live stream, so hope you guys enjoyed it. Aaron, thanks for taking the time.
See you guys.
All right.